is 1821. In Missouri, a 28-year-old American prepares to leave the United States to make his home in northern Mexico. Stephen Austin is his name. In Tennessee, another 28-year-old American practices law and prepares to enter politics. He is Samuel Houston. At Veracruz, New Spain, a 27-year-old Army captain leads a revolutionary force against the Spanish government. With his help, Mexico will soon be an independent nation. He is Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. Austin the settler, Houston the lawyer, and Santa Anna the soldier. All three will be important in the history of Texas. The Texas that Stephen Austin entered in 1821 was the northernmost part of New Spain. It was larger than Texas is today. When Spaniards first explored and settled the region 2 centuries earlier, it was larger yet, extending northward into land that would become Wyoming. To Spaniards, the word Texas meant peaceful people. But Spaniards found little peace there. Apaches, Comanches, and Wichitas resisted Spanish efforts to dominate them and convert them to Catholicism. With guns and ammunition from the French in Louisiana, they fought the Spaniards. But Spaniards stayed in Texas. Among them, the wealthy owners of haciendas, huge estates granted by the Spanish king. Gentlemen cowboys or charros became heroes, dressed in ornamented costumes. They were skilled in horsemanship and roping. In the early 1800s, charros and Spanish settlers lived inland and in south-central Texas. But the Spanish population was small. The largest town, San Antonio, had only 800 people. The Gulf Coast was nearly unpopulated. To maintain their hold on the land, the leaders of New Spain looked for Spanish Catholic settlers. Stephen Austin's father, Moses Austin, had met one of those qualifications. He had traveled in Spanish territory and claimed Spanish citizenship. Agreeing that his settlers would become Spanish citizens and would convert to Catholicism, Austin petitioned the Mexican government for permission to settle 300 American families in Texas. He submitted his plan to the Spanish governor of Texas in San Antonio. Then he died, leaving his son Stephen to carry on. In September 1821, Stephen Austin chose and mapped a huge tract near Texas' southeast coast. And a few months later, he led an advance party overland from New Orleans. Austin's settlers were farmers from nearby Louisiana, Mississippi, and Missouri. They bought land from Austin for 12.5 cents per acre, 10% of the price of United States land. To get to their land, Austin and his settlers traveled a rutted trail connecting Natchitoches, Louisiana, with Nacogdoches, Texas. It was called El Camino Real, the Royal Road, and it was in such bad condition that Austin had sent most of his supplies by ship. A ship that landed in the wrong place, then was wrecked. The supplies were lost, so the first American settlers in Texas survived the winter by hunting. In the spring, as more people arrived, Stephen Austin faced another problem. A revolution had broken out in New Spain. Mexico had become an independent nation. There was a new government whose leaders did not recognize Austin's right to own land. To secure his claim, Austin traveled to Mexico City, 1,200 miles away. When he arrived, he worked for a year, meeting influential people. Finally, Stephen Austin received what he had come for: the right to occupy and sell land and to govern a colony, according to Mexican law. Shortly after Austin founded his colony, Mexico's leaders ruled that Texas should be joined to its neighboring state, Coahuila. They allowed the state to select others who would distribute the land as Austin had. These men were called empresarios. Some empresarios failed to recruit settlers, and their land was taken back by the Mexican government. Others found settlers, but Indian attacks and financial troubles caused them to fail. A few got along badly with the government. In 1825, an impresario named Hayden Edwards began bullying and evicting people who had lived on the land before he came. When Mexican officials objected, Edwards led 30 of his colonists into the town of Nacogdoches. It was a revolution, he said, and he named himself leader of a new Texan nation. Austin and the Mexican army opposed Edwards. They marched into Nacogdoches, and Edwards fled to the United States. Most Americans in Texas were from the South, where slavery existed. It was illegal to own slaves in Mexico, but slave owners worked out a scheme in which they freed their slaves, but asked each one to pay his or her own value. Having no money, the slaves became servants for life. So slave owners kept their slaves. Americans continued to migrate. The population of Texas grew until in 1830 there were more than 20,000 Americans there. And then the United States government under President Andrew Jackson offered to buy Texas land to extend the U.S. border into Texas. Mexico's leader, Anastasio Bustamante, said no, and he appointed a tough military commander for Texas, Don Manuel Mier y Terán. Terán advised his government that Mexican border guards should stop American immigrants, that goods from the United States should be taxed, that all Texans should be forced to worship as Catholics. In 1832, Terán fortified the border and moved in troops. Texans became concerned. Their concern grew when Terán picked Colonel John Bradburn, a Mexican-American, to command the town of Galveston. Bradburn arrested settlers and tried them in military courts. To Texans, this was intolerable. But another revolution had begun in Mexico, with a leader who seemed to be promising democratic rights and freedoms to all Mexicans, including Texans. That leader was Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. After fighting in Veracruz, Santa Anna had become a general and a governor. Now he was opposing Bustamante. Texans were delighted. Stephen Austin wrote, Santa Anna asks nothing for himself, but all for his country. Santa Anna's revolt succeeded. He became president. Texans gathered and decided to ask for favors, like the right to receive U.S. goods without paying import taxes, and permission for more Americans to settle in Texas. Toward these requests, conventions were held in San Felipe and Nacogdoches. Sam Houston was there. He had been a fighter in the Tennessee militia and governor of Tennessee. At the Nacogdoches Convention, Houston helped to write a petition asking the Santa Anna government for rights and freedoms. Stephen Austin carried that petition to Mexico City and was told that Americans would again be permitted to settle in Texas. But Santa Anna would not separate Texas from Coahuila. He would not remove army posts and military governors like Bradburn. Angered by these refusals, Austin wrote, "The country is lost if its inhabitants do not take its affairs into their own hands." For this statement, Stephen Austin was jailed for 3 months. Santa Anna was even more unjust than Bustamante. The breaking point came in 1835, when the Mexican army arrested 2 businessmen who had been complaining about high import taxes. A crowd gathered outside the courthouse. They attacked a Mexican messenger carrying military orders. Reading them, Texans learned that they were about to lose their rights and freedoms. The Mexican army would take charge of Texas. Angered by these orders, 25 Texans, led by a young lawyer named William Travis, fired a single harmless cannon shot over the Mexican post at Anahuac. Travis wrote a letter of apology, but Mexico's commander Martin de Cos was unmoved. He ordered the Texans to arrest Travis and try him for treason. They refused, and Cos marched 1,400 troops into Texas. Austin said, "War is our only recourse." Other Texans agreed with him. At the town of Gonzales, when Mexican troops came to take a cannon from Texans, they were greeted by 160 armed men and a sign reading, "Come and take it." The soldiers advanced. The settlers defended themselves. And that was the start of the Texas Revolution. From fall 1835 through spring 1836, Texans fought Mexican troops. At first they fought for rights and freedoms as Mexicans. There was Houston, who became commander of the Army of Texas. There was a frontier adventurer named James Bowie. There was Davy Crockett, who had been a congressman from Tennessee. There was Moses Levy, chief surgeon of the Texas Army, who laid down his bandages and fought at San Antonio. There was Edward Burleson, an Indian fighter who stopped the attack of Cos. Several of these men fought and died in February 1836, when Santa Anna led 5,500 Mexican soldiers against 183 Texans at an old mission armory, the Alamo. When Santa Anna killed the Alamo's defenders, Texans agreed. They were no longer fighting for civil rights, but for independence. Only 6 weeks after the Alamo fell, they surprised Santa Anna at San Jacinto. Sam Houston was wounded, but the Texans won. The Mexicans were defeated. Santa Anna was captured dressed as a civilian trying to escape. Suddenly, Texas was no longer a part of Mexico, but neither was it a part of the United States. In April 1836, the leaders of Texas declared their land an independent nation. And Texas remained independent for nearly 10 years. Though Mexican armies continued to invade, though Indians continued to attack, though Texas did not have the population, industry, or finances needed to stand alone. Sam Houston became president of Texas. He offered certificates for free land. Over 100,000 people accepted the offer. Though most of the new Texans were Americans from the southern states, many came from Europe, from France, England, and Sweden. Many came from Germany, where emigration societies recruited settlers. A German, Prince Karl of Solms-Braunfels, brought over 400 settlers to Texas. He went bankrupt. A Jewish Frenchman, Henri Castro, surveyed and mapped Texas land. He built a European settlement in southwestern Texas. But Castro failed to provide for his people. He lost his land. All that remained of the developers was the names of their towns. Throughout Texas, people had abundant land, but they lived without conveniences, without good postal service and roads. Their army was the militia, volunteers who frequently went home to work their family farms. The Texas Rangers defended settlers against Indians. But there were only 200 Rangers in all of Texas. Indians continued to attack, especially Comanches, who clearly saw that Texans were taking their land. Because Texans wanted the U.S. government to defend them, they voted to apply for annexation to the United States. But most members of the U.S. Congress were against annexation. They voted no to avoid helping Mexican rebels and because many objected to slavery in Texas. So Texans survived on their own for 10 years until, in 1845, the pressure for annexation became stronger. Congress voted to accept the Texans' petition, and Texas joined the United States. Texas, the land entered by Stephen Austin. The land that Santa Anna tried to preserve as a part of Mexico. The land that Samuel Houston fought for and won. Texas had become the 28th